Welcome back to the show, Business Mastery for Startups, Scaleups, and Early Stage Businesses, with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me. This week, our guest is Dennis Jackson. Dennis is a longtime entrepreneur and business person working with an exciting company that he'll share more about here in a moment. And we're going to talk today about different formats your business can take. Intentionally vague introduction over. Dennis, why don't you fill in some of those blanks?
Hey, Jerry, thanks for having me on. And we're going to talk about just what it's like to own a business and plan. It's always exciting at the front end, but then I'm on the back end of it. So it's also thinking about, okay, what do you do on that exit and how do you kind of plan and coordinate for that? So there's different phases of owning your own business.
Absolutely. And Dennis, would you mind just to fill in some of the blanks on your background so people understand your position, how you got where you are, what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I've owned Work Solutions for 13 years, but it's really about how I got there. So my background is accounting and operations. I worked for Speedway Petroleum, which is a gas station up in Central or Ohio area. From there, we moved to Dallas, Texas, and I was with 7-Eleven food stores and had gasoline operations east of the Mississippi. Then I went to work for Frito-Lay, and that was probably one of the best places to learn process and operations and efficiencies. From there, we moved to Houston, Texas. So my life is I moved a lot, if you haven't figured out. Houston, Texas with Imperial Sugar. And then from there, we moved to Memphis, Tennessee with Union Planters Bank. And I had all the purchasing operations for a regional bank. And then we moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and I was head of purchasing and real estate for a healthcare company. To say all those pieces played into helping me get the business started because a lot of what I do now is I reflect back on those experiences of those different places and can share with business owners and partners that I work with of just how to navigate through some of the challenges from an operations standpoint or an accounting standpoint as we help people kind of navigate what to do with their business.
That's exciting. And one of the great things I found is just that being able to draw back on a wealth of experience in diverse roles and share that with early stage companies. But focusing on our topic, as I am a bit of a chatter or a chatty Cathy, the exit part, I really find exciting. So when I first started consulting about almost 10 years ago now, I would bluntly ask in the beginning, and I've since learned doesn't work great, and change the way I do it. I would ask the owner or whoever I was working with, what's the 5-year plan? If you were to end in 5 years, what form would that exit take? And they would become often pretty irritated by the question as they didn't feel like it was germane to my reason for consulting. And I explained to them that if you don't know the direction you're going, you can't inform the decisions you're making now. And that's why when we spoke, for those of you on the show who wouldn't know, we were introduced through a mutual friend, and we were speaking a few weeks back, and we kind of touched this topic. But what would you say from an exit strategy perspective? You knowing what you wanted to do has how that's impacted the decisions that you've made.
Yeah, so the first piece, I have a son and daughter, and I knew my son wasn't going to be involved in the business because he works for Chick-fil-A and he's doing great. My daughter came to work for me, and my plan was that she'd work with me, and then I would just hand the business off to her at some point in time. And about 3 years in, she's like, I could just tell it wasn't her passion, that there was something else she wanted to do. And we had a heart to heart and, agreed that this was, she enjoyed working with me, but she didn't want to own this business in the future. And many businesses I think are, singlepreneur, but you've got family members that you think you're going to hand it off to. And in many cases, they don't want the business. And so that's kind of a shocker in a way to some people as you navigate through that. So luckily for us, we figured that out 4 years ago. So early on, so I was 9 years into the business. I wasn't ready to sell it, but it told me, hey, I needed to change a path that it wasn't going to be handed off to a family member probably. And so, and that changes the trajectory of what you've got to do because now you've got to get things a little bit more orderly than just handing off to a family member that to go sell it to in the marketplace because to make it valuable, you've got to show that you've got, increased sales, and that if you're truly a solopreneur, it may not be as valuable to the external people as it is to you, because you're the business. And so you've got to then add other people, other processes to the business to make it valuable. So when you exit, they're buying the business, they're not buying you. And I learned that really about a year after Megan, decided not to do this. And so, it forced me to change trajectory and look at how can I get more people involved on the selling side? How can I get people more involved in the building side? And I had intentionally built the business with little to no employees and had more 1099s. And so that caused me to kind of change that trajectory as well, and how we were going to kind of work that. So those were, definitely have the heart to heart if it's a quote family business, to make sure that the family really wants it after you get ready to leave, because otherwise, if it's near the end and you don't have time to make the change, you end up with a business that's not really worth a whole lot.
Yeah, there's a couple things you said there I'd like to dig into in a contrast compare kind of way. So my exit was with Apicero. Longtime listeners know we talk about that quite a bit. But that company was built, the founding team, intentionally to sell. Our plan was to get to a certain point and then be acquired. Now, as a technology services firm, our primary source of sale would be acquisition by a larger firm that wanted the bench that we built. Yeah. And so every bit of money we made along the way, we reinvested in building out that very profitable bench, so that not only would that become something of a flywheel that we're able to grow that much faster as we continue to grow, but also so that once we hit a critical mass, a larger company would buy us. And ultimately we were bought for 9 figures. So it worked well. but the point in mentioning is the decisions we made were because we knew what our end story was.
Right.
And what you said really, really plays into that, even though our journey to that point sounds like it probably was wildly different than your own.
Yeah, because mine was definitely a business / lifestyle. So, my background, like I said, had been corporate America. I'd had, 20 to 300 employees at one point in time working for me in those different roles. And when I made the switch to this, I knew that I wanted to make money, but it wasn't like I needed to make millions and millions of dollars. We had saved up well. We were doing well. I knew I didn't want to retire, but I knew I wanted to do something. I wanted to give back. And my focus was on that small to mid-sized business, helping them, navigate through some automation and workflows that they probably wouldn't, either try on their own, or they were scared, or they heard of, Oracle and SAP and all these others that, are great tools, but can be pretty expensive to a small business. And so my whole focus was on that lifestyle and being there to help and guide them, but not be in the politics and the minutia of day-to-day work that they had to do. And it's worked great. I mean, I started with one client. Today we have 125 customers that we support in some form or fashion. But as soon as it starts feeling corporate-y, I don't like it. And so I've made a real heavy intention to make sure that the relationships with my customers are a positive one and not a negative for me. And make it so it works. And that lifestyle was important because we also wanted to be able to travel. And, my neighbors think I don't work. And so it's like, it's because I'm able to work different hours in the way I want to work, not a typical 8 to 5. And I think that appeals to a lot of people. I'm talking to a couple young people that are 28 right now and they work corporate, and they're thinking about making the shift. And their whole shift is quality of life. It's not about making, billions of dollars. It's really that ability to have a good lifestyle, but also be able to work and give back, but also enjoy life. And that was a choice that we made when I started this and my wife came along with me as well on this one. She didn't think I was crazy.
Yeah, well, that's always a positive. You said a couple things that I think we need to point out that are important for any business that's looking at any type of exit. And that's how involved you are as the founder. Now, in the beginning, you are the company, and quite obviously, you're touching everything. But Dennis brings up a super important point, and that's that as the founder, the more involved you are in key accounts, in day-to-day operations, and in sales, the more you're the face of the company at the exit, the more the acquiring company is going to require you to stay on. So it's normal in an acquisition to stay at least a year, typically 3, sometimes even 5. But if you're the face of the company, think 5, not 1.
Correct.
And number 2, if you're too deeply involved, it will impact your valuation and whether someone is interested in buying your company at all. Because to your point, Dennis, they know that if you're the business and you're eventually selling to leave, that there goes the business they bought.
Right. And if you've been that solopreneur or entrepreneur for 10, 20 years, and now all of a sudden you sell and you're going back into that corporate role on the finish line, that's a challenge that you really got to think about, because now all of a sudden you're not the
Oh my
decision maker.
gosh, yes.
You're an employee now, and to your point, it could be 1, 3, 5 years. More than likely, I've seen several where it'll say 5 years, probably about 3 years, they begin to kind of wean you out and you fade away. But it's still, you got to ask yourself, is that how you want to finish the race, going back into a corporate role, even though you're more of an advisor at that point? And, but it's a mind shift that you've gone from corporate to being this entrepreneurial experience to back to kind of a corporate role that because I looked at selling last year, and that was one of the parts I just didn't like. The dollars were there, but all of them, to your point, wanted me to stay 3 or 5 years as an employee. And I was like, I don't know if I really want to be an employee. I'd rather just keep, and I did the math, and mine's kind of a reoccurring type of thing. So once our clients are with us, they stay for long periods of time, and it's a monthly payment that they're paying in. So it's kind of like an annuity. So as I started doing the math, it's like, why don't I just bring some people on and let them run this thing more? I still own it, but then over time, give them ownership of it. And I fade away at when I want to fade away, not when someone has bought me out and told me how I'm going to fade away. And those are decisions you got to make.
And I want to stop there because our focus is on what that exit can look like. And you just enumerated many of them. So I work in technology services. A lot of my clients are either technology services or technology product companies. Product companies often get acquired to be a division in a larger company. And that founder knows that they're going to be going from CEO founder to SVP of X division. And that's a part of their exit. And if they're prepared for that mentally, then that's good to go. For myself, I'm a small company person. When we broke 1,000 employees, it wasn't very much fun for me. When we broke 2,000 and we're still climbing, I wasn't having fun. I'm not a big company guy. So when we got acquired, that was a true blessing. But that's another thing to understand is you need to understand the sales norms for your industry. So in technology services, now this, again, Apicero is a MuleSoft implementation company. We're a bench-based software implementation company. But in other roles, I've been part of technology staffing companies. In the technology staffing world, it's difficult to sell your company until you break about $25 million in revenue. The reason for that is because of the way the industry is structured. Until that point, I don't want to be dismissive and say you don't have a business. Obviously, if you're running a $50 billion business, that's a real business. But what there is to buy, the systems and processes typically don't evolve and mature enough until you're around 25 million. So you need to understand these things and do your research to understand what exit options you have. So again, circling back to technology staffing, if you sell prior to that, for the most part, it's an aqua hire to get your talent, and they're buying the contracts that you have. But when you get bigger than that, they're actually buying the blue sky of your name, and that's where the real valuations start to multiply. So understanding your business norms is important.
And I think, you hit on having those contracts. Make sure you've got things documented, because that's the value. I mean, you've got a relationship with all these different companies, but if it's not documented and they can exit real quick, your value is not a whole lot. And luckily for us, everything was documented. All of our contracts are 3 years or greater. So, as we went through this process, they saw value in that because they knew the return would come that way. And that, I had it structured where I had some salespeople and I had the business operations piece. They were all 1099. So that, they're like, hey, if they were employees, that's a different value versus if they're 1099s. I chose to go to 1099 because I'm like, Jerry, I didn't want a lot of employees. I wanted people that were engaged and excited, but not having to worry about doing performance reviews and all that kind of stuff, that it's really motivated on helping customers. And so, as you go through that process, you just have to, again, when you're starting out, it's one thing, but I encourage people think at the end game as well, even though it may be 10 or 20 years from now, so that you're taking steps along the way to get where you want to go. Because if you try to do it at the very end, and I've got several clients of mine that we support that they're 2 years out and they haven't thought about it other than, oh, I'm going to sell it in 2 years. And it's like, well, you're not going to get much because you make money, but it's not repeatable. You are the business. And when you leave, it's not going to be as valuable as you think it is. And one of them went through the evaluation and she got shocked of that when she's gone, it's something very creative. Well, she's the creative one. Well, they're going to either have to hire a bunch of people to replicate her, and they weren't sure that it can be replicated. And so it was not really worth anything. And I think, she was shocked with this company that she was talking to evaluate it.
What a great example. Not a happy one, but a great one.
No, but it's real. And, and she makes lots of money. I mean, she's making, 10, 20 million a year in this stuff, and she's got people working for her, but she's done all the creative all this years. And it's like, it can be repeated, but someone's got to almost start from scratch, because that, or she's going to have to stay on, like you said, for those 3-5 years. And she didn't want to stay for 3 or 5 years. So those are challenges that they face.
You bring up another thing that's worth mentioning as we're talking about structuring companies and endings. So one of my long-term mentors started a business, and he worked for the same company for about 30 years. He ran one of their most profitable locations for about 30 years, and he just got tired of the corporate thing. So he started his own company, went on his own. He's like, I'm not hiring any people. I'm just tired of managing. And he earns a respectable amount, mid 6 figures. He's certainly doing well. He has a house in Mass, house in South Carolina. You're as likely to talk to him with his toes in the sand as you are with him in his shoes in an office. He's living a great life. But as we talk, he's like, Jerry, the difference between us now is you're building a company. I gave myself a job. And he said, I fully acknowledge and accept that when I get tired of this, for the most part, I'm probably just winding this down. Yep. But he's fine with that. He's living a great life. He's, investing his money in other areas, and it's exciting time. And I say this to highlight, folks, there's not a wrong answer to exit. You're the one doing the thing. Do you? Just be aware of what you're doing. My friend Mike, if he was planning on selling for big bucks, he would be disappointed. But he's on the path. He knows what the end looks like, and he's excited by it.
Exactly. And and that's one where I was at. It was more about that lifestyle and that reoccurring revenue, and knowing that, hey, when it comes time to end, I can hand it off to someone. I might get a little bit, but it's more of that, because my piece was, hey, I also was thinking from my customer's perspective that, hey, I want to make sure that when I hand this off to someone, that they're not robbed of what they've already got, and that they're taken care of moving forward. And so, it's just looking at all those different things of how you can do it. And that's, we've come up with a really good solution on ours, where I've got someone that's kind of more sales focused, another person that's more operations focused, that'll get to play and be part of it. And they will actually end up owning it without really paying much to me, because instead of giving it up in 2 years, I'm probably going to stay around for 12, 15 more years doing this stuff, but just in a lesser role, and they'll begin to get more ownership over time. And it works out great it works out great, because I'm 64. It's like, I don't even know what I would do if I retired, because I love working with people and doing this stuff, but I also like to travel. I like to play pickleball and all that stuff. So I still see myself doing it this way for another 5, 10, 15 years, just at a different level, where pickleball may become more my world and work may become less, but it's still there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So my dad's 76, still works full time. If I retired at 53, I'm fairly certain he'd disown me. So I don't see a world where I retire. But in all seriousness, I've never really understood the fully retired mindset. it feels, and I hate to be negative in this way, it feels like the waiting room for death almost. I just, at least having something where I can spend 5 hours a week sharing what I've learned and being
Yeah,
mentally active. I just don't see a world where 100% retired makes sense to me, assuming no
exactly.
medical problems, of course.
Exactly. And especially with AI and stuff, it's just fun to stay involved and see, okay, what's changing and how, I was telling people, you've got all these big companies and other ones doing AI, but there's still lots of small and mid-sized companies. They're still in spreadsheets. They're not even in software. And it's just fun to help them realize that they can do so much more with AI and stuff. So, I mean, I think my business and me personally will probably morph over the next 5, 10 years just because of what AI does and how hopefully I can help other people get turned on to AI and see the ways it can help them grow their business, that it becomes another business that I may make a little bit of money and enjoy it. Like Jerry, I've got a podcast as well. And so I enjoy doing that because it's just fun having guests on and listening and learning from people. And I think that's the key thing is continue to learn no matter what age you are.
Yes. Yes. I do have to share an old man story with you though. So
Okay.
I started in this business in technology staffing as a technical recruiter. Late 90s, just before the dot-com crash, which shows you the magical timing I've been able to
Hmm.
master in my career, joining the industry just as it falls apart. But back then, Microsoft was the belle of the ball for small business, which is somewhat ironic given how big they are now. But they were the belle of the ball for small business. And
Yep.
people used Excel spreadsheets for everything. We used to joke it was the most popular database in the world, and it's not even one. Um, but fast forward from that time to about, I'm going to say about 3 months ago, maybe it was 4 months ago. I was talking to somebody. He's like, "Yeah, I've got all my stuff in Google Sheets." I laughed to myself. I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" 30 years later, it's still the same. The most popular database in the world are spreadsheets.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and because it's simple and easy, but
Yeah.
people just, and it's, people are, we're creatures of habit. It's just easier to keep doing it the same way sometimes than allowing the new stuff to get in there and show them how that it can be much more efficient. And I think that's what's fun is opening people's eyes because I always say people are rich in data, poor in information. And it's like,
Yes.
okay, how can we take that data you got and make it come to life for you without killing you? And so
Exactly.
that's the fun part that we have as we do stuff. And that's why it doesn't feel like work. It's an opportunity to help people, with their businesses do things that they probably couldn't have done without getting involved with them.
No, I couldn't agree more. Let me ask you this. This has been a bit of a wide-ranging conversation. If you had the opportunity to talk to any business owner in the world, today, what one piece of advice or what one thing do you think you'd share with them in an effort to help them improve their businesses and their circumstances?
The one piece I always tell people is make sure you are continually networking. And networking it's a two-way street. It's not just trying to get introductions, but also in return, giving introductions to other people. Um, I'm coaching 2 or 3 younger people right now to start a business. And as young people, their networks are pretty small. It's like you've got to get out there and connect with people on LinkedIn, get involved in meetings where you can meet other people, and then in return connect them to people and because most of my business has grown through relationships. It's not
Yes.
grown through emails and ads and all that. It's usually referrals from people I know or customers I know that trust us and introduce us in, and then vice versa. The reason we started our podcast was to give back to all my customers because a lot of them were asking, hey, who can help me with legal? Who can help me with accounting? Who can help me with marketing? I'm like, and I knew all these people, and I'm like, let's just have these people on as guests on our podcast and share so they can listen and they can begin to develop those relationships and hear ideas and then connect with people. So growing that network is huge. I've seen people that only have, 200 or 300 on LinkedIn. I probably have 5 or 6,000. And most of them I know either, and it's because I've moved around and, everywhere I go, I'm usually Mr. Networking. And networking is get involved outside of work. So like I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. in a suburb called Franklin. And for 5 years, me and three other people put on the Franklin Christmas parade. So I was known as the guy that did the Franklin Christmas parade. Well, the parade's huge. I mean, we have 15 marching bands, and it's like a 3-hour parade. It's like a mini town Macy's Day Parade. But everybody knows us because of the parade that we put on, and so it's a way to get involved and give back to the community. But also, then it's also a way to network and meet people. And so networking for me is key. Number one, doesn't matter if you're selling or buying, or if you're in accounting or wherever, you got to network and meet people.
Given that you and I are talking because a mutual friend introduced us, it's difficult to disagree. And I do want to add one thing that's important because you bring up LinkedIn. LinkedIn is both the best thing ever to happen in networking and simultaneously the worst. Because one of the things you said that I really want to drive home, Dennis, networking is two ways. It's not, I follow Dennis's podcast, so I link up with him in LinkedIn and think he's in my network. No, that just means we're connected. If I don't do anything to feed and nurture that and develop an actual relationship, it's not a network. It's a name on a list. So yeah. I agree with you completely.
In my CRM, I label people A, B, or C. A's are they're great networkers, and great networkers are I would be willing to introduce them, and they introduce me to people. B's are I definitely like them, and I'll introduce, but I'm not sure they'll introduce me. And then C's are I don't really like them, and I would never introduce them, and they probably will never introduce me to anybody either. And so it's a way to kind of keep that filter. And and those A's, every day I'm connecting them to somebody with, in some conversation or something will come up and I'll say, hey, Jerry, let me connect you with Josh, or let me connect you with Benny. And then the connections are just real easy emails. A lot of times it's just, hey, I like to connect good people. You guys, I want to continue the connections. You guys ought to chat. I don't tell them what you do, why you do it. It's just connect people. It's all about community. If you think about it, and that community can help you and the other person grow their business, grow relationships, nurture whatever it is they're trying to do. So networking is big to me. Having those relationships, that's the key foundation of any business that I would encourage someone that's starting out or running a business. A lot of people I know focus on the dollars and all that, but the dollars come. I kind of follow the Chick-fil-A model is if you take care of your employees and you take care of your customers, yes, the profits are going to come.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Let me ask you this. We're going to wrap up here in a minute, but before we do, tell people just in a little more detail what Workstation does, so that if there's an opportunity for you to work together, that they have that opportunity.
Yeah. So Work Solutions is, think of it. Our tagline. That's fine. Our tagline is bridging operational gaps. So typically, someone will have some kind of operating system or stuff over here on one side, and then if you're a small business, probably QuickBooks or some accounting system over here on the other side. But there's all this stuff in the middle, and that can be a CRM. It can be trying to track inventory more effectively. It can be project management. All that stuff that usually you're doing it in spreadsheets. That we can bridge that gap with technology that's not going to blow the budget. It's cost effective. That will help you bridge that. If you think about, usually companies are entering the same data. We find at least 4 times, probably closer to 5, but you'll put something in a CRM or some kind of CRM type of thing, something in an operating system, something in, if you're shipping stuff, in some kind of shipping tool, some accounting tool. That every time you're entering that stuff, first off, that's an opportunity for mistakes. Second, it's a waste of time and effort. So we help you figure out where do you enter that first, push and pull that data so that it happens electronically versus manually having to be done. And then we also just help you then from there be able to create reports and information that right at your fingertips. And so we've been doing that for 13 years, love doing it. Some are real simple, some are real complex. A lot of our clients, like I said, live in QuickBooks and they try to run their business in QuickBooks. The best way to kind of think of us, if you're trying to lose weight, the scale is like QuickBooks. You step on it, it tells you how well you did. We're more like that trainer or coach that on the front end, we're helping you look at, did you eat properly? Did you exercise properly? Or if it's business, how are sales doing? How are operations doing? So that when it flows to the scale and you step on it, you already know what's going to happen. You don't have to run to the accounting department to find out that I make money or not. You already know it well in advance. Because in many cases we found, from my experiences, you don't find out if you're waiting for accounting. It can be a month to 3 months after the fact before you realize you even have a problem, because it may be just a little trickle, and all of a sudden it's a major issue. Where if you had these tools on the front side flagging it, you would know what's going on. And so that's what we do. We try to help bridge those operation gaps.
It sounds a little bit to me like an SAP and Oracle and ERP type system, but for smaller businesses. Would
It
I be
is,
right
and,
in saying that?
that's fair. And I always say, a lot of people get scared with pricing of the stuff. If you've looked at some of these competitors that you mentioned, usually ours will take a zero off the end is kind of a good idea. Yeah.
We're one comma less.
Exactly.
No, that's awesome. Dennis, it's been great speaking with you. Where can people reach out to you, learn more about you, and learn more about Work Solutions?
Yeah. So a couple of different spots. One, you can go to our website, which is Work Solution. It's WORX I have to kind of plug this. When we started the
Every
company,
tech company does that.
yeah. When we started the company, it to get that S on the end, so worksolutions.com was an extra $2,500 that I didn't have at the beginning when we started the company. So we just provide one solution, but not we provide a lot more. You can also email me. It's dennisj@worksolution.com, and also connect with me on LinkedIn. Would love to chat and learn more about what you guys do.
Awesome. And longtime listeners already know this, but for any new folks out in the crowd, all Dennis's contact info will be in the show notes, so please don't crash your cars trying to write that down. Dennis, thank you very much for being on the show. I deeply appreciate it. Love to have you on another time to talk more.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Jerry. Thanks again. Enjoyed it.
Awesome. Goodbye, everyone. Have an amazing week. And